This is Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, presented by the Bearded Iris Brewing Company, here to do SEC baseball and NCAA baseball regional projections through Monday the 15th. Did not include the outcomes of Tuesday's games on these calculations. Wouldn't have changed a lot, if anything. We'll go through some games. It might affect some overall seeding and things in a minute. I'll have Blake pull up the graphic with the projections in just a minute. There we go right now. But first of all, you'll notice something new across the bottom of the screen. I've done a computer composite top 50, and these are not regional projections. They don't really factor into seedings, but I just thought it'd be a kind of a fun thing to do. There are four computers I like, might give you an idea of what teams are relatively strong outside any RPI metrics. So that's just something I threw in for fun, although I see I left out number 49, whoever that would have been. So my apologies there. But anyway, let's get right into the regional projections. And again, these were done through games of Sunday and have not included any midweek games or Monday games that have been played. Wake Forest, the top overall seed. Wake, I think, is everybody's consensus number one team now that LSU's pitching has sort of fallen apart. Will be opposed by Miami, which was my last hosting team. I think you will see other places that have Miami higher in the pecking order. As I dug into the record and the body of work with Miami, the RPI is good, but there are some issues there. And so I think that's one that you could see change based on Miami's weekend. A big series up with Duke, which I think will have an effect on both teams. Miami is 4-9 against the top 25 RPI teams and 6-3 against 26 through 50. Again, those numbers would be through the weekend. Miami's best series wins: North Carolina on the road, Virginia Tech gets swept at home, and it took two from Georgia Tech at home. I'll get into Georgia Tech a little bit later. That is an interesting case there. But I had Campbell and Miami battling for that last seed, and I don't know that I got it right. I think you'll see more Miami than Campbell as you look through national brackets as they come out. But I think the Camels are a team to watch. In fact, the other teams that I think are probably in the hosting mix that aren't in here, teams that might get a look: Indiana State, East Carolina, Connecticut, Oregon State, Southern Miss, Washington, and Boston College. If Boston College can get that ACC record, a couple games over 500, that RPI as of Wednesday morning, I think, is at 14. Boston College, as you dig into the record, not an incredible resume. The best series win would be a sweep of North Carolina on the road, and got a lot of single game wins over here with Wake Forest and Duke and Tennessee and Clemson, some good ones, but also went 18-9 on the road, and the RPI again high. Series with Notre Dame this weekend. If BC were to sweep that, then I think you could see Boston College be one of those hosts. You'll see Connecticut as a team that a lot of people have hosting. I don't think Connecticut is as strong as that RPI. Again, I think when you dig into the record with the Huskies, you get some problems. 1-1 against 1-25, 0-1 against 26-50. Best series win was a sweep of Rutgers, which I don't even have in the field this week. So, again, it's not just RPI. It's what else do you have? Okay, on some things on the top line, I've got Alabama going to Miami. If you will notice, the computers, the RPI computers and the non-RPI computers love Alabama. This is the team that, if it can sweep this weekend, I think is going to be in the hosting mix. And Alabama has got a series coming up with Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa. So Alabama 13-14. If it can get 16-14 by sweeping Ole Miss, I think you have to consider Alabama a potential host. Although then you get into the issue of how many SEC teams can host, which is a really hot topic right now. And really, how many get in is a topic, too. I've got 10 in the field this week. Okay, a couple more things on the top line here. I have projected the automatic qualifiers by taking what I thought was the best team. Again, that was aided through computers. I think the midweek games count in there. That's pitching depth. I think you're going to see that play out in conference tournaments. So, for instance, I will have St. Joe's projected as my automatic qualifier for the A10. I think most people have Dayton, but the computers had St. Joe as being the best team. And so I just did that with every conference. In the one-bid leagues, I projected out what the computers said was the best team as the conference winner. So that may differ from what you'll see other places. Okay. Some other things here. Maryland, I think, slid a seed line last week. Maryland's RPI, I think 48-ish or so. So that may be one team to watch for the bubble. UC Irvine, another team. The Big West is not strong. The computers love Irvine, though. I think it's a really good team, and that'll be one that will be interesting to watch in terms of bubble discussions. All right, let's move down to the second line here. Arkansas has moved up to the number 2 overall national seed. I've got the Hogs hosting against Iowa, Kansas State, and Bryant, which I have winning the America East. On the other side, Dallas Baptist was one of my final host considerations that made it in. Again, you can see I went regional here with Texas State, and Grand Canyon, which I've got projected to win the WAC. Okay, if you'll move on down to the Baton Rouge Regional, Blake, which will be paired with Stillwater. I've got a rematch, as I had last week, of Southern Miss and LSU. This time that will be in Baton Rouge. My apologies to Southern Miss fans. Last week I had Southern Miss listed in Conference USA. I was using an old graphic from last year. Didn't make that mistake again this week. It will be opposite of the Stillwater Regional, which I think is going to be a really tough one if I've drawn this up correctly. Oregon State is a 2 seed by RPI. The predictive computers think Oregon State closer to a top 10 team. So now the committee people are not going to consider that at all. I'm just making some comments about the relative strength of teams. Of course, Oregon State is a blue blood. These guys know how to go and play on big stages. And so Oregon State is not a team that I would want in my regional. And those West Coast teams, there are not a lot of West Coast hosts. So they got to go somewhere. You got a lot of teams from the Big 12 is 2 seeds and 3 seeds. Those obviously do not go in the same regional. So some of these teams like Oklahoma State are going to get sent teams from out west because there just aren't going to be enough out west hosts. So Oregon State, I've got traveling to Stillwater just as a way not to send OSU all the way across the country to Miami or Charlottesville or somewhere like that. And, of course, regional pairing, I think most people would have Texas A&M as a 3 seed right now. I've got A&M going fairly close to Stillwater, relatively close to compared to some places it could get sent. And you would have an Oklahoma LSU. That'll be SEC on SEC within a year. Oklahoma, probably one of the weaker 3 seeds. And I sent them to Baton Rouge to kind of balance out a Southern Miss team that would be a relatively strong 2 seed, I think. All right, Florida, by sweeping Vanderbilt, has moved up to the number 4 national seed. The Gators didn't have a great resume in terms of big wins coming into last weekend, but sweeping Vanderbilt took care of a lot of business there. So I've got Florida, number 4 overall. The Gators have got a chance to move up, I think, to even maybe 2 or 3, depending on what LSU or Arkansas do this weekend, or really, for that matter, Wake Forest, although the RPI lagging a little bit. Florida Gulf Coast would be one of the easier, probably 3 seeds. Of course, geography plays in here. I've got that regional paired with the Conway Regional, where Coastal Carolina will host Campbell, which, again, I had as one of the teams I was looking at to host and probably the first team I cut. So if Campbell has a big weekend and some other teams falter, you could see Campbell move up into that host line. TCU is a 3 that I would not want in my regional. Again, you had to send some of these Big 12 teams to other places. So that is where I sent the Horned Frogs. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll down to 5 and beyond. I've got Stanford as the 5 by virtue of that gaudy Pac-12 record. Indiana State, a team that RPI-wise is in the hosting discussion, but when you dig into the resume, just not a lot of big wins. What Indiana State did was play a lot of really good to great teams and lose most of those games, which helped the RPI. But as you dig in and say, who can this team beat, that's when you run into a problem. Now, I will credit Ben Upton for coming up with something on Twitter. He pointed out, I think Indiana State's AD is either on the selection committee or the head of the committee, and I think they're supposed to leave the room as discussions are being held. I'm just taking Ben's word for it here. but there's always peer pressure and things like that. So that could be a dynamic to watch if Indiana State is sort of in that hosting mix, is having representation on the committee. Santa Barbara, kind of a bubble team, staying out west. San Jose State, I've got projected winning the Mountain West, trusting the computers on that one. I don't think that's going to be a team you're seeing projected as a 4 seed a lot of places, but that is how I arrived there. Okay, I've got Palo Alto and Charlottesville meeting up. And frankly, Virginia may have been a team that I underrated a little bit this week. I think you'll see Virginia in that top 8 national seed discussion. Some interesting dynamics with Virginia's resume. Virginia's unbeaten outside of the conference. And that conference record improved this week. And I think Virginia maybe swept somebody after some recent struggles. And so the ACC record now 16-11, that firmly gets Virginia in the hosting mix and maybe the national seed mix. Road series with Georgia Tech coming up this week, and I think that'll be key to determining where Virginia sticks on here. But a 41-11 overall record, that is really, really strong, although 16 of those games were 150 and up in the RPI. If you start digging into series wins, Virginia has swept Miami at home and taken 2 of 3 from North Carolina on the road. That is kind of Virginia's problem, is that in terms of high-end series wins, the Cavaliers are a little bit lacking there. But 24-0 out of conference, no matter who that comes against. And I think it is now 25-0. That's pretty strong. I've got Washington going across the country to Charlottesville. Washington, again, a team that you might keep an eye on as a host. Washington has just slowly crept up that RPI mix. I think is inside the top 20 as of this morning, on Wednesday morning, or really close to it. Again, geography is going to play a factor. And if Washington, which has got a really good Pac-12 record, let me look that up as we're doing this. Washington is 16-10 in the Pac-12, also 16-8 on the road. That's really strong. Just swept Oregon, I think, on the road. Has taken a series from Arizona State. So Washington, a team that you might keep an eye on for hosting, because really you need another host out west, and that would take care of some geography issues and a lot of teams that you're seeing get sent to the Midwest or even the East Coast, because where else are you going to send these teams out west with just one team hosting out west, that being Stanford. Okay, Morgantown and Clemson, I've got matched up against each other. I think West Virginia is getting really close to that safe territory, winning the Big 12, which, of course, plays a round-robin schedule. I sent Boston College, which, again, another team to watch for a host. Out west, Oregon, a team that has really fallen off the map into the 40s in the RPI, just has really struggled lately. Has gone from a team that I think a lot of people had hosting a few weeks ago to almost a bubble team. I think the Clemson regional could be interesting because Auburn has been super hot lately. Troy, a team that was a bubble team. Clemson was one of the closest places geographically that I could send Troy, so I did. And the computers still think Wofford is the best team in the SoCon, even though I think Wofford is second or third as of this morning in the overall standings. But watch that one. Kent State is a 4. Might be the toughest 4 in the field. So that's one that you don't really want to face on a Friday opener, but they got to go somewhere, and I sent them to Morgantown. Okay, let's scroll down and see what we got left in the last 2 regionals, Blake. We've got Nashville. Vanderbilt has fallen, I think, from 3 or 4 to 7 by being swept at Florida. I've got Indiana, which Bloomington geographically not too far away from Vanderbilt. Indiana has been sent to Nashville before, so we've got precedent for that. Georgia Tech and Vandy also get matched up in regionals frequently. Georgia Tech is not a team that I think you will see in a lot of projections this week. But, man, if the committee is doing its homework and digging into resumes, there's a lot to like here beyond the surface. Now, Georgia Tech, 30-21 overall, 43 in the RPI through the weekend, just 12-15 in the SEC, or excuse me, in the ACC. And that's not a place you want to be ACC record-wise to get an at-large bid. 6-14 on the road. So, yeah, there's some ugly stuff with Tech. But when you dig in, Tech is 8-9 against the top 25, 4-5 against 26-50, and has only got 2 losses from 101 plus. Georgia Tech has taken a home series from Clemson, taken a road series against Duke, got a midweek win, I think, against Auburn, or was that a weekend win? I think it was a midweek. Taking a series from Notre Dame at home. So if you dig into series wins, Georgia Tech's got some stuff there. I don't know how much people are taking notice. I don't know how deep the committee will dig in, but if I'm picking the field, I've got Georgia Tech in as an at-large this week, even though it is 12-15 overall. In Columbia, South Carolina, I've got North Carolina going to Columbia. I think UNC a solid 2 at the moment. USC, a team that got in the field this week that wasn't there last week. I want to say the RPI right in that 57 territory. More importantly for Southern Cal, it is now 16-11 in the Pac-12. Now, there's some issues with Southern Cal. 5-13-1 on the road, 2-3-1 against top 25, 2-9 against RPI, 25-50. So you look at that against the top 50. Does 4-12-1 cut it? I don't know. Maybe not. But 14-5 against 51-100. Has taken a series from Stanford, has swept Arizona State. And I think I had Arizona State out this week. I sure did. Arizona State, I think, has been in the bracket for a while. But as I've noted, if you dig into the big wins with the Sun Devils, there weren't a lot there. So USC replaces Arizona State in my field this week. I've got Santa Clara being the strongest team in the West Coast Conference. Again, you got to ship those Western teams somewhere. So I sent them across country. Finally, we get to the bottom. And Durham, I may have Duke overseeded at 8 this week. Duke also lost a midweek game this week. Speaking of which, here's some games that didn't factor in that I'm just going to mention. Duke lost to Gardner-Webb this week. Coastal Carolina beat North Carolina. Campbell beat East Carolina. South Carolina dropped a game to Charlotte. Portland beat Oregon State. Northwestern beat Notre Dame. Mercer beat Georgia Tech, TCU beat Texas State, and Southern Cal beat Loyola Marymount. Those are games that didn't factor in here that could bump a team up in a millimeter or two in where they are. I don't think it would change anything with hosting or regional projections, but sometimes things happen in increments, and those teams all probably moved up or down a little bit from where they were based on whether they won or lost. I've got Duke facing Tennessee. Again, geographic proximity. The Vols, on one hand, a team that really computer-wise worthy of a 1 seed. If you look at the predictive computers, you can see the power rankings at the bottom. On the other hand, we have made note of Tennessee's issues in terms of being on the road. So is that a fluke? Is that something that resolves? I don't know. We'll find out, because unless Tennessee probably sweeps South Carolina on the road this week, and the Vols are probably going to be a 2 in someone else's ballpark. Cal State Fullerton, a team that is projected to win the Big West. That's a 3-team horse race right now. You got some weird scheduling things out there with some teams having 2 conference weekends to play and some other teams having just 1. Fullerton, I've got projected to win the Big West right now. The Big West is, I think, the only team that doesn't play a tournament and sends its automatic qualifier. But Fullerton also, despite being, I think, 17-7 in the Big West, I want to say low 50s in the RPI right now. So that's one of those things that if Fullerton doesn't win the Big West, the RPI might be prohibitive in terms of the Titans being in the field at all. So that's one to watch. Finally, I've got Kentucky as the 9 overall. Kentucky is just and I've misspelled Lexington. My apologies for that. Don't know how that happened. Anyway, Kentucky, one of those teams that just is an RPI quandary. Number 1 in the RPI this week. I've seen Kentucky picked, is a 13, 14, maybe 15 national seed some places. I just think with the conference record and the RPI, I have a hard time putting Kentucky any lower than that. In fact, I might even swap UK and Duke at that 8 and 9 this week after Duke lost yesterday and has stumbled a little bit lately. I've got Notre Dame, geographically proximate, going to Lexington from South Bend. I've got Texas Tech, a team you probably don't want to face as a 3 being sent there. And Moorhead, which the computers have as the strongest team in the OVC. Again, I'm looking at that as a predictor to win the conference tournament. That is pretty close to Lexington. And so That's why I've got Moorhead going to Lexington again. Kentucky really tough to know what to do with that RPI, and also Duke with its stumbles lately. I thought Duke was a really good and underrated team, but I believe Duke is something along the lines of 14-11 in the ACC. The Blue Devils this weekend, let me look this up and see who they've got. Oh, I think they've got Miami. They do, and that's on the road. So 15-11 is Duke's record in the ACC, and I think if Duke wins 2 or 3 against Miami this weekend, you can probably lock them in as a host somewhere. 1 of 3, it might get a little dicey as that RPI falls. And again, Duke is one of those that I think in 8, as I do this on Wednesday morning following that midweek loss to Gardner-Webb, that might be enough to knock Duke out of hosting 2 weekends. Probably is. So just note that. That might be one disconnect between this work, which I did on Monday and Tuesday and did not have time to factor in Tuesday night's games. That might be one place where I've got something on paper here that you could see change. All right, quick shout out to our title sponsor, the Bearded Iris Brewing Company. It is Nashville's home for a beer that is unapologetically itself, memorably composed and fun to drink. They offer a wide variety of hop-focused offerings like IPAs and DIPAs, as well as selected fruit sour, stouts, and a new hard seltzer. We, of course, are located in the Nashville area, so check them out when you get a chance and tell them thank you for sponsoring our channel. All right, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Those things help our analytics. We'll see you again soon with more NCAA and SEC baseball content.